Chapter 84. The dragon's blood and flesh were not an easy thing for me to devour. Not only did I have to deal with Drakul Karfang's incessant screaming as I went about eating her still lively beating heart, but even as I devoured her soul with each bite, I had to use not only my own spiritual pressure but also the power of my world to scrub her soul clean of its ego so I could safely absorb it, as I had no damned plans to have another voice in my head. Eventually, I succeeded in physically devouring both her heart and all the blood within the tank, and thus as a result I felt her soul fading away from the surrounding magical treasure filling the cavern. Until finally, after several more hours I spent grinding away her consciousness and soul within myself, I permanently killed Drakul Karfang, with her soul being ground down to oblivion and the resulting pure spiritual energy being used to bolster my own. Fuck. Her soul was the reason why the treasure was glowing, haha. I couldn't help but chuckle when I opened my eyes only to be welcomed by pure darkness, as all the surrounding treasure had lost its glow. So, I made a weak ball of spiritual energy hover above me, casting the surroundings in a dark purple tone as the purple ball of spiritual energy lit up the surroundings. This is a lot of treasure, I muttered as I took in the scattered piles of all kinds of treasures, with the whole ground being covered in some coins at least, which made the ground kind of a pain to traverse as my shoes would make the coins I stepped on slide around. Astrid, come shadow warp all this treasure back to my treasury and have a couple of the dwarves start counting and sorting it all, I ordered, Astrid sending the equivalent of a hug to me through the shadows in my clothes, and then all the thick shadows cast by my purple ball of spiritual energy stretched writhing as the spatially attuned shadows swallowed all the treasures and sent them to the castle's treasury, where some dwarves who signed magical oaths of loyalty would sort out the treasures and such. My lord, do you plan to go after Azazyel as well? And what are you going to do with Drakul Karfang's body? Astrid asked somewhat tiredly after spatially shifting literal tons of stuff to my castle. I hummed in thought before I shrugged. It's my first dragon kill. Obviously, I am going to mount her head over my fireplace, I said, strongly nodding, as I didn't care if her head was bigger than my massive sitting room. I will have the dwarves construct me a grand hall like in Whiterun in Skyrim, with a massive, homely room where my first dragon kill can be properly mounted and admired. I mean, the hell else is a better conversation piece than a dragon's head angled downwards towards a feasting table? I could imagine it now. My old team was back together for a fun little get-together in the middle of the Skyrim-style feasting hall, with Kid Flash obviously asking me what the hell was mounted on my wall. Oh, Wally, it's just the head of the Dragon Queen Drakul Karfang. She was one of Wonder Woman's enemies, but when she came back to life and was terrorizing the fairy lands, I killed her, stole all her treasure, and now I use her head as nerf dart target as I try to shoot certain scales. Would you guys care to join me? I mind asking, and I could just imagine their reactions. Artemis would probably be all for it, as she liked hunting, and maybe Superboy, but the rest would probably be too scared to shoot the dragon head that has a habit of resurrecting. Anyway, I will take Drakul Karfang's remains back home rather than leave it here. As you probably cannot move it all alone, can you? I asked jokingly, and Astrid raised up her arms firmly in an X in front of her chest. Hell, no, Jake. I can move the treasure, but a whole dragon, and one that is probably super magic resistant. I rather not die, hee. She joked wryly, and before I could respond she dived back into my clothes to remerge with the shadows within. I just sighed at the work ahead of me, and as I groaned while hefting the remains of the dragon, I couldn't help but remember those damned huge plant monsters that I had to meet into space that the Injustice League had created. I wonder what happened to those, as the vacuum of space wasn't lethal to them. Oh, and whether Poison Ivy had suffered any real consequences for it, as she wasn't in Belle Reve when I cleaned it out. Taking the dragon back home, I dropped it beside my castle's grounds with a mighty crashing noise, having the Fey servants rushing out of the castle with the newly recruited assassins looking out for their shadows with truly dumbfounded expressions that broke through their programming, seeing me drop the corpse of the dragon on the ground like it was just a boar or deer I hunted and pulled off the tailgate of my truck. Human workers come here and begin removing the flesh, scales, and other stuff for it to be processed. But make sure not to harm the bones, or I will be very disappointed. I finished ominously to the once assassins, who bowed and went into the castle grounds to presumably retrieve tools. As I watched the assassins run off, I saw Galatea and Raven flying over to me, and Galatea looked pissed. Jake, you bastard. How could you go off and kill a dragon with me? Galatea screamed at me from across the castle grounds, making me nervously giggle with God Killer humming in my hands and sending a feeling of amusement at my distress.